One of the things that I find particularly valuable at these conferences, apart from the chance to work with you again, this most important level of government in Queensland, is to come away with a greater understanding of technology and social shifts that will fundamentally change the way we all work, and obviously in some instances already changing the way we work. In this case, it's big data, which I think comes up every conference we have, and I'm just piecing together a bit of basic knowledge about it. Thanks very much to the presentations that I receive at these events. And this morning we're going to hear about a public purpose for big data with Neil Glentworth. Now, Neil has worked with an extensive list of public and private clients within multiple sectors across Australia, New Zealand and across Asia. Neil is retained by several public and private entities in a governance function. Neil spent his formative years in senior leadership roles within the military and received a noteworthy commendation for his service. And during his military career, Neil supported the social and economic stability of multiple countries, delivering critical services in the face of extreme risk to underpin domestic, foreign and defence policy. Would you please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Neil Glentworth.
Thank you very much, everyone. President, I might be running around here, so please don't be offended if I've got my back to you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the opportunity. President, thank you for the opportunity. I see Lord Mayor Graham Quirk has just run out of the room as soon as he found out I was speaking. Well, I'm not offended, that's okay. It is wonderful to see so many impressive civic leaders in one place. You all share a common bond that the President and the Lord Mayor of Brisbane started to articulate, which is nobody else understands your communities quite like you. You know the individual characters, you know the nuances, you know when you get a complaint from a certain person, oh, we don't really need to worry about that, they do that all the time. In fact, what we should just do is lock the doors and solve all of Queensland's problems in one go, right here, right now, because I reckon the knowledge in this room would be able to fix many of those. And with that knowledge and insight, us as a community, I thought we might kick things off by us getting to know each other that little bit better, and us engaging, for the first time ever, something completely unique, an edition of Family Feud, LGAQ edition. Is everybody ready? Everyone ready? Fingers on buzzers, okay? Fingers on buzzers, everyone ready? So this is that. I'm not quite Grant Denyer. I believe I'm probably about twice the size of him, to be honest. I think he's about one of my leg sizes. But I thought we would engage in a quick game. So very soon you're about to see a slide. And on that slide will be 6 things that you might find in your house. If you have more than 4 of those 6 things in your house, you're to raise your hand. Now don't be shy, you're amongst friends. Is everybody ready? Here we go. We have a wall calendar, we have a filing cabinet, we have a CD player, we have a VHS video cassette recorder, we have an alarm clock, and we have a takeout menu. Do you have more than 4 of those in your house? We've got a pocket over there. Nobody, a few over there. Have a look around you. Have a look around you. There's not many hands going up. I'll tell you what, my hand's not going up either, to be honest, because this is my house. I've sadly not got any of these anymore. I'm really sorry that I don't hold them in my house, because each one of these things, let's face it, you've probably replaced. The calendar, it's on your phone. Filing cabinet, store it in the cloud, unless you're a celebrity and your photographs turn up somewhere else. CD player, I've got music whenever I want it. I've got CD, Spotify. That said, I am a vinyl collector and I do have lots of records still. But I can get music wherever I want. VHS, how many of you didn't recognise that? No, come on, there's a few people in here young enough not to recognise it. An alarm clock and a takeout menu. Each one of these things in our society, wherever you live in Australia, in Queensland, no matter how regional, no matter how remote, has changed. And what has changed? What has been different? We've all been given a better opportunity. Take airline travel. Many of you flew here today. You got to pick your own seat, yeah? Everybody knows the person that gets the middle seat is the person that didn't pick their own seat, and they get really, really upset about it, and particularly upset if you don't understand the armrest rules. Everybody knows the armrest rules. Window gets theirs, aisle gets theirs. You've got to understand. But you even got the opportunity to do that. And again, it's that thing about choice that is giving us an enormous opportunity and is changing the way we operate and we work. When you think about the services you provide, when you think about what you offer in your council, how much choice do you give? It's one size fits all more often than not. And despite the amazing work that you do in your councils, choice is everything. And let me delve into that, because none of you here set out to put your local video store out of business. No one did that. No one wanted to do that. None of you here set out to upset taxi drivers. None of you set out here to put the local CD shop out of business. But each of those things have become more convenient, more accessible. Each of those have provided greater opportunities in our economies. Recently, I was stunned when I was in Darwin, where they allow Ubers, but they're not allowed to the airport. And a plethora of American tourists were just bamboozled by the whole concept. And when tourism is their greatest priority, and it's the one thing they recognize when they land, they don't want to put the taxi drivers out of business, but it gives people greater choice. So you've heard it spoken about, data. And some people talk about data is the new oil. Let me just sort of, give you a bit of insight to that. There is one thing that that phrase shares in common, data is the new oil, is data, just like oil, has to be refined to add value. You've got to refine it, you've got to understand what's going on, you've got to understand the opportunities. And many of you here already are all engaged in data projects, whether that's on your own, whether that's through LG Sherlock. And I know, I've seen, that's producing enormous benefits for councils. You're finding enormous savings, enormous opportunities, and that's doing a wealth of good. And every time you deliver those savings, that's great. But here's the reality of the challenge. You're getting the savings, the community's still a bit frustrated, and your costs keep going up. Fuel, electricity, labour, water, insurance, recycling. There's a constant change. So every time you find something and you think, great, that just gets swallowed by an increased cost somewhere else. And it's a difficult challenge for you in local government. I've had the pleasure of working with many different local governments all around Australia, and particularly in Queensland. I clearly would never be in local government because I'm just completely unsuitable. But I have enormous admiration for your resilience to keep pushing ahead and doing the quite amazing things that go on in each of your communities. I would suggest to you that your ratepayers really only want three things. They want value for money for their rates, they want individual delivery of services, and they want a vibrant economy. Yes, public safety. Yes, they want the bins emptied. Yes, they want those things. But they want those three things. And I think the President was very right when he talked about that quip about roads, rates and rubbish. What utter nonsense. I can think of so many councils like Barcoo. I can think of councils in Barcaldine. I can think of those in Charters Towers. Without the councils, things wouldn't be happening. And I'm a big advocate of smart cities, data, all of those things. But there isn't a civic leader in Australia that's been elected on a thing about a smart city. It's about the basic things, getting right. And those basic things are more important than ever in such a rapidly changing economy. The President touched on one of the aspects around here, but for those who aren't aware, the Elderman Index of Trust, which is the trust index in our institutions, and that's been covered somewhat, but if you've not read this, it's worth a read, it's worth a look at. Basically, Australia's trust in public institutions is some of the worst in the Western world. Okay, the decline is massive. That's banks, that's not-for-profits, and that is public institution. And so the challenges you've faced in Queensland, and they have been notable, is something that's shared all around. And we can argue and we can look at other levels of government and say, yeah, well, it's just because they're rubbish. Well, there is a case of they're rubbish, but also there is a case that you are cycling, pushing against a headwind like you have never pushed before. Because the economy is changing so fast, things are different, and you have to think differently. Data is being done to death by many different people. There isn't a paper you can't pick up. There isn't an Australian financial review that you can't read. Even your local newspapers will talk about the value of data. But it is the most significant asset you've got, and moreover, it's the most significant asset your community's got, and it's screaming to give that data to you in return for a better service. So let's jump in our time machines. We've played Family Feud now, and let's fast forward. 28th of March, 2021. So hopefully you all recognise the date, maybe not the year. So this is 1 year after your local government elections, 2028. Now, I do live in Queensland, and I do, for those, some of you know where I live, I do have a council, and I am being genuine now. So if I get shot, I'm going to keep moving so that they can't get me. 28th of March, 2021. You know what I want from my council? Do you know what I really want from them? I want them to be a bit more like Netflix. I want them to be on demand. I want them to provide me with preferences, things I might like. I want them to engage in my behaviour. You know, most importantly, I don't want them to talk to me about my house. I want them to talk to me as an individual. I know that that's where you make your money. I know it is. But just like everything else, whatever it is, I want to be treated as an individual and my members of my household. And technology has given us that opportunity. I can assure you it's a lower cost, far, far lower cost. I want my council to be open 24 hours a day, and many of you are, and you've made great strides. There's some incredibly impressive things that have happened at an individual council level, and I don't take that away. But I want you to be data-driven. I want you to be evidence-driven. I want you to show me the facts. I want you to say, hey, you've got a choice, Neil, barbecues or swings in the park. We can't afford both. You tell us as well. I want you to engage in that conversation with me. I want you to not just broadcast social media and give me an update. I want you to engage. I want you to listen to the social media in the same way you're listening now, in the same way some of you are tweeting away now going, who is this lunatic? I want you to listen to what I'm saying. I'm quite happy for you to take data from my car and monitor the roads so that I don't have to phone you up and actually say, hey, there's a pothole. I don't have to pester you. I'm quite happy you take data where I drive. I'm quite happy to do that and share that. In fact, I'm quite happy that you monitor some of my buying and spending habits, some. If I buy dog food and I don't have a dog registration, do I get a nice thing? Hey Neil, I see you're buying dog food. Would you like to register a dog? We can help. It's not far from fetched from the truth as it stands. If I go to Bunnings and buy DIY gear and I start ruining my house, wouldn't it be great if actually the council was saying, hey, see you buying some DIY. Do you need a hand with your development application? Do you want to engage? Because the cost of you finding it out after and you chasing someone because they haven't put the DA in right and the costs are lost in there is quite significant. I want you to be more like Netflix. That's what I want from my council. I want you to engage with me. I want you to be personal about it. And that opportunity exists. It exists already. And actually, it's already happening in many other places. Now, of course, Neil, you're going, well, what an idiot. This guy is he's on drugs. Back there, he has been taking something back there, and he has no idea what he's talking about. He's English, for a start off. We always beat them in rugby and cricket or something. He's got no idea what it's like here. Well, let me just paint a perspective of how far things have changed. Most of you here are parents. You've certainly got parents. Do you remember when they said to you, don't ever go to a stranger's house, never get in a stranger's car, never talk to strangers? What do we do now? We get in strangers' cars and we go and stay in strangers' houses. It's a reality. The culture of our society has changed of what's acceptable. So when I'm talking about providing you with the data on my dog food, it's not too far-fetched, because right now, strangers' houses, strangers' cars. And let me tell you, Airbnb, which I know is contentious and I know is challenging, Airbnb and those opportunities offer so much more choice. I've stayed in one of the best Airbnbs in Queensland, and I'm pleased to stay, Mr. Rob Chandler, it is in Barcaldine. And I kid you not, it is one of the best Airbnbs. And I went to see the motel owner after, and I said, have you noticed any drop in trade? And they said, no, we've actually seen it lift up, just a different, and we can predict more, because people have choice. So this isn't too far-fetched. Strangers' cars, strangers' houses. Driving in the rearview mirror is a very dangerous thing to do. I didn't take this photograph, but where we have been, what we have done, what has happened has got us to this point. But the economy and the social and economic fabric is leaping over us constantly. We're forever stunned at the different opportunities that are being presented to us. And it's fair to say that your businesses are complex, really complex. You know, no one else delivers the variety of services that you offer. No one else has to pick up all the issues when nobody else cares. But things are changing, and you've got to consider how you're going to change as well. The community will always find a way to innovate around you. They will always move past your barriers no matter how hard you try. And why? They've got choice. They can do what they want to do now. Oh, no, but there's laws and legislation. Yeah, Uber had laws and legislation, but it knew that the demand was so high, it went ahead anyway. Airbnb went ahead anyway. iTunes went ahead anyway. Microbreweries going ahead anyway. The community will always find the path of least resistance. And the community are talking about this. In fact, where I live, if I want to know potholes, crime, barking dogs, somebody selling some jam from their house, the local butcher, I just go on Facebook. And in fact, if there's an incident, a roof has blown off or something like that, the very last people to know are the council. Now that's not right, because it's incredibly expensive for you to actually provide services of that. But I want you to be more engaged in the conversation. I'm providing that data, but instead I just get little broadcasts. We're upgrading this road. I want you to be engaged with me. I want you to continue that conversation. This is the challenge, what has happened. And many of you do this really well, and I take nothing away. Disaster management, you do exceptionally well in terms of planning in the future. But what has happened? LG Sherlock and the likes of programs have given you enormous value of what has occurred. But this is the real gold now, and where you need to start thinking, what might happen? What might happen, and how do you plan for that? How do you think about what might occur? What might I like as a resident? What am I thinking about? What are the new revenue sources that you as a council are seeking? What are the opportunities? And I think, it is purely, and I can say this because I'm, independent. I think it's appalling you only get 3% of taxable revenue. I think it's absolutely insanity given the complexity of the services. What might happen, and the community is screaming for you to do this, absolutely screaming. The constant community chatter of things that we look at for organisations is, why isn't the council engaged in this? Why isn't the council looking at this? There is an enormous opportunity. So you're thinking to yourself, righto, he really is mad, and what on earth did the LGAQ allow him to do this sort? Because you're thinking, oh, this is fraught with risk. This is going to be horrendous. We're just going to end up in court, have the Privacy Commission on it, the information, you know, we'll be having those lunches, unwanted lunches, as Lord Mayor Graham Quirk referred to, all the time. This is fraught with risk. And how can we possibly generate revenue to service the council? Well, all these companies are managing it just fine. And yeah, they're commercial operators, and they've had privacy breaches, and they've done some unique things, but they're changing the way. Sadly, apart from Brewdog up there, absolutely none of them are Australian-based. And that's a whole other conversation up there. And if you've not tried Brewdog, I'm not a paid endorsement, but it is fantastic. But let me talk about something that I've observed that's happening. One of the things that the LGAQ has been working on, and I'm not a paid endorsement, is around ethics. I have the privileged position of being able to have very robust conversations with many organisations. Some people like them, some people don't like those conversations. And one of the things that the LGAQ has fought really hard about, Greg and Glenn have really looked into, is the ethical decision. I'm not on about privacy, I'm on about ethics. Just because you've got the data, can you use it? That is an incredibly important thing, because data, if it's the new oil and it can be enriched and do these amazing things, can really cause some real unintended consequences. And one of the things I've been really impressed by is the LGAQ's committed to ethics. Can I tell you that no other public sector institution in Australia is putting together an ethical approach to data use? None. There is not one. Privacy, yes, but not a complete ethical approach. And I am so impressed by that, that the thinking has gone into that. That is what we should be demanding of the federal government, but they're a laggard in this space. The state government, they're a laggard in this space. The only other countries doing this are the UK, US, and Singapore, who focus on ethical use of data. So you should take enormous pride that this is occurring, and there is a lot of lessons to be learnt from it. I come back to this choice, and now with all what I've said, have a think about that in terms of the choice that you can offer your community. Is it so far-fetched that you can say, hey Neil, I see you like doing this. Would you be interested in this service? Hey Neil, we've noticed that one of your business keeps tendering for this work, and we don't have this in our local economy. Can you come and talk to us? Using the data, the insights. Hey Neil, I've noticed you and your friends on a Thursday night congregate round one of these streets, and you cause a bit of trouble, you naughty people with public safety. So by looking at social media, predicting where that's going to happen, and also perhaps putting on events to socially, economically activate. Many of you here have been to the wonderful place of Rockhampton, and in Rockhampton, on the foreshore there, where they've socially and economically activated a whole area that used to be quite a problem area. It's one of the most vibrant, impressive places. Give people choice. You will be surprised at what you get back in return, because it is commonplace in many other economies. Many, many others. Now, I realise this is tough, because really the relationship your ratepayers want is they actually don't want it with you. They want it with their phone. And they want to consume it with their phone. But they want to access it in real time. You sit on any form of public transport. People are watching Netflix. People are listening to books, doing everything. They have choice. And unless public services are providing choice and thinking differently, I can assure you that community trust element will get harder and harder and harder. And you'll find yourself spending more and more money trying to catch up. Because you remember in the old days when you used to have to wait in on a Saturday night because you couldn't record something and you had to watch your best program? For me, it was Knight Rider in the UK. My wife, who's Australian, tells me it was Hey Hey, it's Saturday, but I don't know anything about that. But now I've got choice. Now I can choose to go out and do what I want to do. Now I have that opportunity, apart from rates bill, pay this money for house. And that's it. That can't be the model way forward. Because, for instance, if I had a choice and you said to me as my counsellor, hey Neil, we know you care about recycling, but it's more expensive. Would you pay an extra $5 a quarter so that we can pay for recycling? Done. Because I care. But give me the choice. Don't just keep wholesaling me everything. And the data can offer that amazing insight. Data for a public purpose. I would ask you when you go away from here, think about how you can make better decisions with data. Think about how you can interact more deeply with your communities. The President announced there are a couple of tenders going out. One very important one, which is around new community engagement. That community engagement and tuning in to the individual level will be the most valuable tool for you as elected officials and executives. There are many councils in Australia that are already doing this, and there is some amazing success stories. This goes way beyond that whole concept of smart cities, which, as great as it is, there's a fair bit of snake oil in it. It's about using the data to provide a better insight. And the local authorities in the UK, the US, Singapore, and even in some third world countries that are doing this are seeing great gains. They're seeing high revenues, seeing greater community engagement. We have to change. We have to think differently with data. Because as local government, you are the most impressive level of government. What you do and how you do it every day, my hat goes off to you. But you can do more with less with the data. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Neil, can I just ask a couple of quick questions, if that's all right, before you go? And if you've got a question from the floor for Neil as well, we've got a couple of minutes up our sleeve before morning tea to ask it. And I just wanted to ask a little bit, there's a very good point you made about don't get into strangers' cars, don't go into strangers' houses, and what do we do now? So Uber's announced this morning that it's going to roll out into regional Queensland cities before the end of the year.
Yes.
What are the implications around what you've been discussing this morning when we see Uber start to become a much more common feature on our landscape?
Well, let me talk about the positives. And I hate to keep picking on it, but Ed Warren and Rob Chandler have been unlucky enough to entertain me out in their region quite a few times. Let me just pick on Barcaldine as an example. Barcaldine, for those who haven't been, wonderful, wonderful place. It is, when I took my children there, they were stunned by the fact they can walk down the main street and no one has to care. But guess what? They've got no hire cars at the airport. So it stunts the tourism opportunity. And it's one of the biggest inertia and handbrakes. And in Longreach, there's only a limited amount of hire cars. And mostly it's the LNG or it's the gas or it's maybe government agencies take that up. Having Uber will unlock enormous potential. Will it impact the local taxi service? Probably not as much as you think, as long as it's planned for. And what it will also do is it will unlock the economic potential for those already sat there going, where's the job, where's the opportunity? But not everything in change is negative. I can give you so many great case studies of where it will be of enormous value. Places where you've got airports, council-run airports, and you've got a lot of tourists, Uber is an enormous opportunity for it. Again, I'm not paid by Uber, but it is an enormous opportunity.
I know you're not a transport economist, although I wouldn't be surprised to learn you are, but how does that not affect local taxis when you bring in extra call-up transport like that?
Well, the free market is a good thing. The free market has created more jobs than it's ever displaced. Jobs just change. Competition is good. And I realise in a small community where you'll know the taxi driver or drivers, it will create some level of friction. But I would urge that it is creating more opportunity by giving you more flexibility in your economy. The notion of a taxi service has fundamentally changed. For those of you who haven't been down in Brisbane in a while, you've even seen Yellow Cabs has rebranded, and their taxis have got newer and they've got cleaner. That's a good thing. Yes, there's going to be change, but as a great quote I love, if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance even less.
That's very true. In terms of the way councils collect and use big data, where does cost come into it? Because some of these councils, of course, have fewer ratepayers than, say, a ward in Brisbane. So are there economies of scale in this? Are there barriers, or is there an entry level that any council can, start to make sure it is using this data that, in many cases, it's collecting anyway?
That's a really good question, and one that I'm asked on a regular basis. Anybody can fiddle with data, anyone, and the barrier to entry is very low. Microsoft provide free tools there. But the real value comes in aggregation. You have a unique beast in the LGAQ. You've got this organisation that basically is sat there that can aggregate, and so I would say to you, wherever you can aggregate, providing it's private, providing it's ethical, aggregate. Anybody can do data projects, but remember, I don't see the boundary in my council. I drive into Ipswich, I drive into Logan, I drive into... So I expect those services I was talking about not to have a geographical boundary on them. So the only way you can do that is aggregating. So the cost of the barrier is really low. One of the biggest challenges in regional Queensland is skills, and that remains a real issue around getting the right skills. Wherever councils can invest in skilling people in data is a real advantage.
Any questions for Neil before we adjourn? Great. Would you be at morning tea if people would like to pick your brain a bit more?
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Well, it is big data writ here on the stage. Please thank Neil again, ladies and gentlemen. Neil Glentworth, Executive Chairman of GWI, our morning keynote.